I think that you are going to be even bigger than Whitney Cummings is today, and I'm a huge Whitney Cummings fan. So smart, funny females that are completely disruptive and edgy. I love all of that about your comedy. You're disarmingly smart and witty, and that is the best kind of part of this whole thing. That's how I found you. And I was like, oh my God, I have to have her on the podcast. So I'm so stoked for you to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I've been compared to Whitney Cummings a few times, and it's such a compliment because I know Whitney, and I'm like, if that's the category people are going to put me in, then I am in good company because it's very exciting.
Yes,
she's incredible.
Well, she, she, like you, are multifaceted in that you're very smart, you're very pretty, but it comes off in like this very disarming way. Like you don't quite expect how sharp it is, and it's got a little edge to it. So you like sit up and pay attention. So I absolutely love it. I'm on board.
I think it's very. I work with mostly men in comedy because I write for all men, and they all laugh because a lot of times the darkest joke I've written in a room full of guys, and the guys are like, it's some little girl that's just writing the craziest, wittiest stuff. And not to toot my own horn, but I grew up with brothers. I grew up playing in the mud. So I love going there if it makes sense. And I'm not afraid to push those boundaries because it doesn't matter if a guy or girl writes it, in my opinion. If it's funny, it's funny. And that's why a lot of times the guys, when I wrote on Shark Week last year, and it was an all male cast, and it was Anthony Anderson, Joe McHale, Adam Devine, Rob Riggle, and Damon Wayans Jr. And it was me, one female, and 3 comedy guy writers. So it was 4 writers total. And the first day we're like pitching, and I'd worked with Adam Devine and Rob many times before. So they kind of knew my style. So they come to me for the jokes. And then halfway through, Damon and Joel and the other guys, they were like, wait a second. I want to talk to you for a second. They were, can you give me some of that? And I was like, yeah, of course. So it's really exciting. And it's fun. I like my fiance is a stand-up comedian, and he laughs all the time. He's like, she's darker than I am. Like, he's known as a very dark black comic, and he's like, her mind is a scary place sometimes that it goes. But you can't laugh.
That's all we got. Right? That's all we got. But for people who can't tell on camera, you're not the tallest person in the room. Can we
I'm very, very tiny. I'm 5'2". Right. And I'm a boxer, so I think in my head I'm a bulldog, and I can. And there are times where people are like, "You're gonna get knocked out." Like, you realize I could pick you up and throw you for the things, but I'm like, no.
But that's what makes it great. Yeah, that's what makes it great. Like that boldness combined with the hair color and the diminutive size, like it makes the comic effect way funnier. Yeah. Right? Like part of comic delivery is that. I think so. So
I think so. And I agree completely.
So let's talk a little bit, real brief, brag for me. Do me a favor for my listeners who don't know who you are yet. And I say yet. Brag a little bit, and then we're going to get into kind of the meatier story. But how would people know you? So Shark Week being one.
Yeah. So I am currently a writer on the show Holey Moley, which we were nominated for Emmys this year in our 2nd season, which was incredibly exciting. And this was the first year I was the comedy person that was completely writing all the jokes. So if you liked anything Joe Tessitore or Rob Riggle said, I probably wrote it. And if you didn't like it, then just pretend, don't tell me that you didn't like it. Because I get those tweets too where people are like, not your best. And I'm like, okay.
Wow.
I also am developing a few shows for Adult Swim and Happy Madison. So that'll be out later this year, hopefully, or later next year. I write, Holey Moley has went internationally, so that's been my whole focus this year. I was just in Australia writing on the show there. That will be out January, I believe, in Australia, and then it'll be streaming on Hulu for anyone. Before that, I wrote 2 seasons of Shark Week. I wrote an entire season on the Discovery Channel for a global investigator show that was a completely Pink Panther investigated silliness that was Discovery was very nervous about, because it's not Discovery at all.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like that.
I've been performing at UCB in Los Angeles for the last few years. I have written on the show Wriggles Picks, which was a Fox NFL sketch show, and we got nominated for a few Emmys for that, which was very cool.
That's how I
this
found
is just
it.
me going, yeah, oh yeah. So that was a very quick learning curve, because I had to do a lot of research about football very quickly. I was like, I got to learn all this, but it was great. And I love working on sketches. So that was like my favorite show. I'm so sad we're not doing it this year, because that was my first real writing show. And then working backwards, I was an assistant for years, and I struggled for years as a production assistant before all this. So it's a funny turn in life. A lot of people see the big writing and the Emmy nominations and stuff right now, which are incredible. But before that, I was an assistant who was not making enough to live and very stressed out. So
well,
I forget that part.
I was just going to say, tongue in cheek, of course, with that much success so young in your life, you must have come from a comedic family that had great connections in Hollywood. And it was tongue in cheek, of course, because I know that you didn't have those.
Yeah. That's right. I grew up on a farm, and in Alabama, and both of my parents are entrepreneurs, so they had their own businesses. And it was a thing where I knew I wanted to be a comedian by 6th grade, because I distinctly remember a moment where the power had went out for like some tornado in our school. And so our teacher was like, I guess we'll do like a talent show to distract the kids. And I went up there and told maybe 20 minutes of jokes, which is impressive, because I don't think I have 20 minutes now. And my mom found the note the other day from the teacher that was saying, like, I think your daughter's going to be a comedian because of this. And I remember that moment very distinctly of me thinking, I'm going to chase this high for the rest of my life, being laughter. And I wish future me had come back in time and been like, you're going to cry a lot. It's very tough. But I had no reason at all to think that I could make it as a comedian, because I had no one in the industry at all. I didn't even live near an industry city growing up. So it was just that determination of like, that's it. That's what I need to do. And that's who I'm going to be. And there's no plan B for me. And it was but there were a lot of roadblocks too. 'Cause, I started college at 17. I don't know if this is the whole backstory we should start with, but, I started college at 17 with a business scholarship, and I'm one of 3 kids. So my dad was like, you're not quitting school with a business scholarship. Sorry, you're already in business school. And, I started working on production. I was working on the show Nashville at 18 as a production assistant half the time. And I came back to my dad like a year into school, and I was like, I'm quitting to go work in film. Like I'm going to make movies. And he's a New Yorker. So he was like, no, you're not. You're not. Like, this is the deal. You're finishing school, and if you quit, you're done. Like, your mom and I are done with you. You're a full adult if you quit college right now, and do not ever ask us for anything. So I was kind of like, I was 18. I was like, oh, well, all right. So I went to my guidance counselor the next day, and I was like, I need to finish school by 20. And she was like, there's people barely make it in 4 years. And I was like, no, I've mapped it out. And I had written out the whole night before every class I should make, assuming I didn't fail anything.
Right.
And every single time, like in the summer, how I should do it. And I was like, no, this is mapped out. I can graduate in 3 years. And I did it. And then I went off to work in film, and my parents were like, well, I guess we can't say anything now. Because she did what we told her. So that's pretty much how I got my little push into it. But there was a lot of no's when I was in college, for sure, saying I was crazy, and I had to break up with my long-term boyfriend for it, and in some friendships. So it was I look back now and I'm like, how did I sleep 2 hours a night, work on a show, and still go to school full time? I have no idea.
Okay, so there's so much to break out.
Yeah.
We gotta pause and go back. But around the thing that you just said, around how were you able to achieve this seemingly impossible task of condensing school and reducing it by 25%, which is huge. Number one. And number two, exiting people out of your life and making those super tough decisions, not getting a lot of sleep, doing a lot of schoolwork, and trying to work at the same time. How are you able to function? So I have this small rant that I'm going to unfortunately lay upon you, which is, I tell people all the time, your mind is so much more powerful than you give it credit for. And this isn't a bunch of woo-woo bullshit. Okay, let's just cut right to it. If you experience a loss in your life, a significant loss, your brain can allow you to suppress hunger for hours, if not days and days, where you just aren't hungry at all. If food is something you need to survive, right? It is a basic tenet of surviving. And yet your brain has the ability to make you not interested in food. Your brain also has the ability that if you're worried or anxious or what have you, that sleep is something that you can pause. Sometimes it feels like for forever that your brain can just push off sleep. Another thing that you absolutely need to survive. So without being all woo-woo, the brain is incredibly powerful and can do far more than we give it credit for. And sometimes I like to just acknowledge those little things like, hey, by the way, you don't have to eat or sleep for days upon days, just based upon concerns within your mind. That's how powerful it is. So if you set it to task, you can kind of think about that and go, well, shit, if my brain's so smart and so powerful, I don't need to eat or sleep. Imagine what would happen if I could just point it in one singular direction. I could probably move the needle like you did. Okay, so that's rant one. Let's dig into being on the farm and being in a rural area, because I have this somewhat controversial statement. I grew up in a very rural town. I grew up in a lumber mill town in northern New Hampshire. And the the path to financial success was to get a job at the paper mill. That was like, you 50 grand a year and you are a rock star. Like that is like the greatest thing you could hope for, right? And so I have this controversial opinion that growing up rural and destitute or poor, and growing up urban and poor, rural is actually harder. And rural is harder because there's no, everyone around you is destitute. Everyone around you is in a crappy position. So there's nobody like in a skyscraper somewhere or driving a nice car where you're just like, okay, I'm going to talk to that person, or I can go see that there's another way to get out of this place. You're in this poverty prison where everyone around you isn't doing very well. They all think the same way. They all do the same thing. And life just feels hard and you don't know any better because you're a victim of your own experiences. Where at least if you're in an urban environment, you can go, hey, look, if you're standing in Compton, you can look at downtown LA and go, well, okay, somebody's doing something over there. So I'm going to get on a bus and I'm going to walk my ass over there and see if I can sweep floors in a lobby somewhere. At least it's a start. But when it's rural, there's nothing. So I got to ask, how did you get from the rural farm to be like, I'm going to Hollywood, peace?
It was a journey for sure. It was like a lot of moves before LA. I fantasized about getting out of my hometown since I was a kid. My older brother jokes, we were kind of raised like twins. We're 2 years apart, but we were just exactly a year apart in school because I had skipped a few grades. So he always used to tell me, because he got a basketball scholarship and he left home and went to Miami, Florida to play basketball. And when he left, I was heartbroken. And he would text me all the time, and he would always say, you got to get out. Like, you got to get out. And you have to do it when you're young, because if you don't, you're not going to get out.
Yep.
And I'm so thankful that he was the only person that really did that, because in my head, I would go back and forth where I was like, I was in a fork in the road where I had a great boyfriend. He was big in our small town. He was a football player. My mom and dad had good businesses, and I could have went that route and probably had 3 kids right now. Oh God. And not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just like myself now could not have kids. So I think I would have been happy, but I think I would have neglected that life so much and been so angry at myself that I would have blown it all up in 10 years rather than at least going for what I really in my heart felt like I needed to do. And I legitimately, when I told people in high school, I was like, you better not be mean to me because I'm going to be famous. Because I really believed that. I was like, I'm going to be someone impactful in the film industry. And that's such a stupid thing to hear in a rural area, because you're a sports star or that's pretty much it. That's where I grew up.
Yep.
And yeah, so it was, and my boyfriend, his parents sat me down when I was like 18 and was like, you need to like be realistic. Okay. And I was so angry. That was one of the reasons we broke up, because when I heard that, my brain went, you don't believe in me.
100%. Go.
Keep going. You don't believe in what I can do. And you're telling him that you don't believe in me. So he's going to think the same thing eventually. And even though he was very upset when we first broke up, and I was very upset because I did love him so much, in my head, I'm like, it's never going to work. It's never going to work with us, because your parents, if they don't accept me now, they're not going to accept me.
Right.
And if they accept me one day when I'm successful, then kind of like all of you, because that's not at all what I want. I'm still going to be the same person.
Yes.
And I think a lot of times it's hard to see what you see it's hard to believe in yourself when no one else does. And I think in life in general, like my older brother works in the stock market, and he was the same way when he was younger. He was like, no one believes in me. No one thinks I'm smart enough to do this. But he's like, I know I am. Yep. And he became successful. I think it's a lot of people need people to believe in them. And at times I do need that, especially as a middle child. But I think it's really like I needed to believe in myself. And that was all that mattered at that point.
So one of the things that we try to do on this show is coax out what I call truth-isms, right? And truth-isms are sort of truth is truth. It's binary. And that I've talked to on this podcast, let's see, rap stars, race car drivers, NFL stars, Navy SEALs, authors, all these different people. But when we get into their journey, we kind of get into the meat like we are now, there's some sort of universal things, truthism as I call, that you can kind of tease out of their story and go, look, the end result is you found your passion and you're being very successful along your journey. Similar to the NFL star or the race car driver, the rappers or the whatever, that's all great. That's the end result. Fine. But the fact that you went, this is who I am. I have to do this. It's almost, I try to tell people, I said, it's almost like an addiction or a compulsion. Like you can't stop. It's in your bones. So I would say if there was anything that you were born with that is lucky, because I don't know if you can teach this to kids. I'm a father of 2. And if I could teach it to them, I would.
Yeah.
Is that exact thing that you're talking about? Because for myself, I hate being poor. We did not have a lot of money for basic things like food and heat, and that sucks. And so I remember just going, I want to make a lot of money. I know that that's not what we're supposed to say, but at the time I'm young, I'm dumb, and I go, I got to make money. money's going to solve these problems. So I became a stockbroker. Funny, I
Mhm.
followed your older brother's journey here. And I literally was working at a rental shed at a small ski mountain, which, by the way, you're working with sweaty ski boots all
Yeah.
day. It's awesome for like $8 an hour or some minimum wage crap, and you're soaked and it's terrible. And I remember telling everybody like, "Oh, I'm going to become a really wealthy person in finance. I'm going to be a stockbroker." And they were like, "Yeah, bud. Okay, whatever." And I drove 4 hours down to Boston with no job, a little bit of money saved up, got an apartment, and literally just cold called and knocked on every single brokerage firm.
Yeah.
Every one of them, interviewed at all of them, and just pushed my way through the door. It was like, this is what I'm going to do. Like, I'm going to be so fucking persistent that it'll be easier for you just to say, fine, stick them in the corner than it will be to say no, because no will be more painful for you. And that's how I ended up getting through. But you have to have that thing that you have, which is that inner, like, I have to do this. Like I say, it's an addiction, a compulsion. It's a weird feeling for people who don't have that. And I feel bad for people who haven't found that in
I
themselves.
completely agree. And it's such a, do you relate to success movies, like where they start out poor and then they make it at the end? Every time my brothers and I, when we see, yeah, exactly. Every time I watch a movie like that, I'm like, that's me. That's who I am. Because I grew up, like, my dad lost his job when I was 7. Okay. And it was a big, big thing. And we struggled for my parents are very successful now, but I mean, there was like hard years of my life that were very crucial to my childhood that I remember that. And my little brother, he's so much younger, he doesn't remember it, but my older brother and I do. And we both have that same set where we're like, I am never going to go hungry again. Like, I have this one, I feel like people who were that way had this one dish that they call their poor food.
Yep.
And for me mentally, it was baked spaghetti. And to this day, I will never eat it again, ever. If you make me eat that, in my head, it takes me back to that. And so my older brother's is corn cakes, like that you make on the pan, like cornbread cakes. He will not, to this day, even if he likes them, he will not eat them because of that.
So mine is barbecue chicken, which takes a second longer. So my mom unfortunately spent most of her time at the bottom of a bottle. And so, and I've never met my dad. I don't know who he is. So what she would do is get the family pack, which is like the thighs and wings, like the shitty part of the chicken, right? Like one big tray. And then she'd buy like generic barbecue sauce, slather it across the top, cook it all at the same time on the grill. Just throw it on the grill, cook it all at the same time, stick it in the fridge and be like, well, if you're hungry, there you go. Yeah. I can't eat barbecue anything, but specifically barbecue chicken. The smell of barbecue sauce is revolting to me to this day. Like I am like, I like smelling, get angry. Like I get pissed off. Like I want to like fight or something. It's a very weird, like visceral response. Like, so when you were saying that, I was like, oh my God, you're talking like right in here, 100%.
Oh yeah. And I think that those little pieces of me is what keeps me going. Is like, I tell people, I always in film, I'm like, do not, I was like, you should be afraid of the person who has the most, or who has nothing to lose. Yes. And for me, when I started in film, I had nothing to lose because I wasn't in it. And the only thing I'm born with and I die with is my name. And so I want my name to be thought of as successful, kind, compassionate, intelligent. And that's the one thing in this industry that I've really tried to protect is like, and who I give my knowledge to, or who I want in my circle, or who I confide in, because I want, that's the only thing that matters. And I was obsessed with the book, The Great Gatsby. And that's a theme where, you know, his name, people knew when they heard his name, who he was. They didn't know who he was, but they know who he was. Right. And that kind of thing really sticks with me, is like, your name is everything. And for me, starting out, my name was unknown. So I could basically build whoever I wanted
can invent yourself.
If I had the opportunity. And I did what you did. I basically kicked down the door when I got in film, because I was like, you're gonna let me in or I'm gonna blow this whole city up, pretty much.
That's exactly right. And
like I'm the villain.
So if you're listening to this and you're in this situation where you're like, I want to do blank, whatever blank is, right? Whether it's film, whether it's finance or an entrepreneur, whatever the thing is. She and I are not joking when we say knock down the city. I called Ben Firestein, shout out to Ben Firestein, Morgan Stanley. This is a long time ago. I called him every day, twice a day, before and after his gatekeeper was going to be at her desk. So she had this lovely gatekeeper, and I would do anything. I sent her chocolates. I tried to flirt with her. I tried to beg and plead. I tried every tactic to get through the gatekeeper. And eventually I realized, oh, she works 9 to 5. Ben works like 6 to 6. So I'll call him at 6 a.m. I'll be his first call and his last call, and I'll just keep hammering him until finally he goes, kid, purely based on the fact that you are being so you're just annoying the hell out of me, I'm going to give you a job, because if you put this much effort into just getting an interview with me, you have no reason to. You didn't go to an Ivy League school. You have no built-in network to be a financial advisor. Who's going to trust you with their money? You're a dumb, poor kid from New Hampshire. Like, it's not going to happen. And he said, but based on your amount of tenacity, I have to give you a job just so you go away and I can get some peace and quiet. I said, okay. And that's how it got in. And I literally, that story sounds easy, but you have to remember, I called Solomon Smith Barney back then is what it was called. I called Fidelity, Putnam. I could name every finance firm. I did that there and got no, all through it, and eventually broke through. My guess is, I don't know every part of your story. I bet your experience is almost identical.
Oh yeah. So when I got into Nashville, it kind of helped in college get me on Atlanta film. But I quickly realized I moved to Atlanta at 20, as soon as I graduated college, and full-time started working as a production assistant there. And I was there until 22 working on film, but I knew people who stayed there just stayed under the line of success. Like, they were in film and made movies, but they didn't do what I wanted to do. Like, I wanted to be flown in and do it. And so I quickly was like, I got to get out. Like, I have this weird thing, and it always comes in threes for me mentally, where it's like every 3 years I have to have a big change in my career. And it's like, I know when I know, it's like, I'll wake up and something's like, you got to get out of this situation. You got to level up. You have to. And it's almost, my fiance says it's a mental disorder almost, where I'm like, it's all I focus on. It's like, you have to, and it's like a puzzle piece where I'm like, I got to figure out how to get out and get the next thing. And so I went home to the family I was living with at the time, and they were about to move to South Carolina. And I had come home from a dubious battle that I had shot with James Franco. And I was like, I'm moving. And they were like, what? And I was like, I'm moving to New Orleans. I'm going to get a job down there. And they were like, no, you're not. You have no contacts. You know no one in New Orleans. Because at the time, New Orleans was shooting Oscar-winning movies. And I knew that Adam McKay was shooting a movie down there. And that's someone I looked up to. And I was like, I'm getting on that movie somehow. So I went downstairs and cold emailed. I got on the DGA website and figured out that you could pull if you went to the directory, you could pull their personal emails. And I went to New Orleans, and I cold emailed, I would say 200 to 300 ADs that were registered to work locally there. Because the movie I wanted to work on was The Big Short, I'd studied that movie in college, or I'd studied the book for business school. So I was like, it's a sign, because Adam McKay is directing it. I need to be on this movie. Like, in my head, I was like, I need to be on this movie. And I blew up, cold emailed my resume, my cover letter, and a quick insert in to all of those ADs. And I did it for a week straight. Like every day I was sending my resume to them. Like, I need a job. And at the point I was like, any job.
Yes.
Callie Pomez, who was the second on The Big Short, looked at my resume after the third time I sent it and saw that I had worked with the director she had worked with years ago. And so she called me and she was like, we're actually looking for another production assistant. Do you know how to run background, which is like their paperwork and stuff? And I was like, yeah. And did not know how the paperwork. I lied pretty much, but I was like, in my head, I'm like, if I've made it this far, I can figure it out.
100%.
So she's like, great. Can you be here? I think it was in 2 days, because she called me a Friday and I was supposed to be there by Monday. And I was like, oh my God. So I packed up as much as I could in my car. I started calling Airbnbs in New Orleans. I found one for the weekend. And then that Sunday when I got there, went and looked at a few places. And this lady who's very sweet, she's like, I have a condo that's going to be going up for rent in a week. So if you can just like figure something out until then, you can have the place. And my parents were very cool about, my older brother moved my mattress and everything down in New Orleans for me because he understood the opportunity. And I'm very grateful for that, because sometimes people don't have those people in their lives. Mm-hmm. But I remember the day I was supposed to go to set, it was like a 6 a.m. call. I had a panic attack on the way to work and I had to pull over on the highway because I threw up, and I was like, what am I doing? I'm supposed to be here, but I was like, how did this happen? Like, I was shaking. And I got 2 other ADs after that called me and said I had movies this summer. So I had lined up movies in New Orleans for the entire summer. And it was like the universe or God or whatever you believe in. And I think it was like, I'm a big believer in say what you want every day. Say it to yourself and say it as if you've got it. And then work for it. Work towards it as if it's already yours.
Okay, pause.
Because I think people
that is so critical. That is so incredibly critical. And going back to the truthisms, I'm going to pull one out real quick, where you committed everything to, look, a week is not a long time, but to send 300 emails and blast these people and not accept anything other than success, which for you was just getting a foot in the door. Number one, it shows tenacity, but also 2, it shows humility. So for a lot of people out there, I hear BS like, oh, I can't take that because I make this much and I can't take a pay cut. So
I don't care.
No, that's the thing. You have to absolutely take a step back in order to move forward. Mm-hmm. And I think of this like, look, life is a maze, to use a cheesy analogy, but life is a bit of a maze. And sometimes we go down the wrong path. That doesn't mean we keep pushing forward. It's a maze. It's blocked. It's an obstacle there. Sometimes we have to backtrack to find another way around, whether we're climbing a mountain or solving a maze. Life is very much like that. And so for you, that is a unique thing that I want people to like pause and really think about what she just said. Sorry to talk about you in the third person, but
very good.
To have a humility to go, what's more important to me? It's not my network. It's not having a bunch of my friends and having a little success here in my town. It's, I want into this thing, a greater thing, something bigger than myself. I'm going to push like crazy. I'm not going to accept anything other than success, 1. Mm-hmm. And 2, I have the humility to go to go get coffee or sweep floors or whatever I got to do just to get my foot in the door, because I know that I'm funny and talented. So once they see that, then I'll move forward, right? That was your journey. But a lot of people they get stuck in, well, I'm a bartender and I make 50 grand a year or 80 grand a year, whatever the number is for them, doesn't matter. I can't take a step back. And they become a prisoner of this silly thing called money or comfort is what I really think about it. They become a prisoner of being sort of complacent or comfort. And you did the opposite of that. You said, hey, that's super uncomfortable over there. I'm going to run headlong into being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So keep going. I want to hear what happens
And
next.
I think it's very too, like, once I've been doing this, this is my 10th year in film, and it's gotten to a place where if I'm not uncomfortable, I think I'm doing something wrong. Like if I'm comfortable in my job, I'm like, it's time to get out.
Yes.
Because to me, that's the scariest feeling, is being comfortable in what I'm doing, because I'm not pushing myself, because I look at life as a ladder where we're all climbing the ladder. We start at the same point. I don't care what life you were born into, if your parents were successful, whatever, you have to make the name for yourself at one point. And we're all climbing. Some people get off at high school on their ledge because they're happy. Some people get off at college, and some people keep climbing. And a lot of times you have to start letting go, because you're so high up, you can't hold on to those people that don't want to climb anymore.
That's right.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's how I look at myself, and I'm chasing myself, the future myself. So when I got to New Orleans, by the way, I, at this point in my head at 22, was like, okay, I'm in the film industry. I'm here. And I had been doing stand-up comedy in Atlanta on my own, like started going to clubs before I was allowed. I was going at like 19, 20 to do stand-up, even though it's 21 and over. And they let me on stage and then literally kick me out. The first day of work, you're like the new kid in school. And so a lot of the other PAs and stuff were like, well, what do you do? And I was like, oh, I do comedy and I do stand-up in Atlanta. And one other production assistant did stand-up in New Orleans. So in my head, I'm like, I got to make friends with this kid, because he knows where the spots are.
Yep.
And so I made friends with him, and because we like the same comic. And he was like, well, I go to shows after work if you want to go. It's always nice to have someone to tag along. So I went and I started doing stand-up. The night I got there, I was going from 14-hour days of work on the Big Shore on this like multi-million-dollar show to these shitty bar clubs doing my stand-up comedy. And that turned into everyone on set knew. And so some people would come drink and watch us, because it was like a thing we would do. There was one day towards the end, we had a lot of extras on set. We had like 200 extras. And the AD was like, hey, why don't you guys, we're in a theater. They're like, why don't you and Stephen Daniel Wayne go up there and do stand up for them while we set up the next shot, to just like chill everyone out. And I was like, this is the biggest crowd I've ever been in front of. Great.
I'm in.
So we went up there. Stephen went first. I went next. And I used a lot of my material that I knew was good, because it was a big group. And I was like, this will kill. I get off stage and I'm going around the corner because we're about to set up for the shot. And Adam McKay comes up to me and says, hey, did you write all of that? And I was like, oh yeah. I was like, I did. I have been working on it for like 2 years. And he was like, that's pretty good. And then he was like, but it would be better if you did this, and rewrote a few of my jokes for me. And in my head, in that moment, because I looked up to him since he had written on SNL, I was like, this is the whole reason you've put in these last 2 months of work.
Yes.
Is this moment to hear him say, that's good jokes, and it would be better if you think this way. And so, and to him, like, I've met him again later on in my life as an actual comedy writer, has no idea that moment sticks with me.
Of course.
It was a brief moment of him. He was sitting up in the banister rewriting the script and just heard us downstairs. And to me, it was the universe saying, right here, you are supposed to be here.
Yes.
And along the way, like, I've cried so much in this industry. And then there's like little moments like that where it's like the universe being like, no, this is where you're supposed to be.
Okay.
Like, you need to stay. So I finished that movie. I started
by the way.
Thank you.
Love that movie.
It was great. I loved it. He's so amazing. I did Deepwater Horizon as my next movie. And that is called the Bad Boys of Summers, what I call everyone on that, because that is where I had no friends in film up until this point. That is where I met my core friend group, who are now execs and huge camera operators and stuff. So we all started out as like camera PAs, wardrobe PAs, accounting PAs, and we all struggled that summer. We had no money. We were going to New Orleans bars where they were like $1 beers every weekend. We were making terrible shorts. We were doing stand-up comedy. I remember Pete Berg found out that I was doing a show, and the club was the comics get half the door, so it's just pay whatever, it's donation. And Pete made everyone from work come to my show, and he tipped the door so much that I was tipped out $2,000. And I remember in that moment too, because he used to call me Little Whitney for Little Whitney Cummings.
Yep.
Because he knew Whitney, so he always called me that. And I was like, that was another moment in my head where I'm like, this is what you should be doing. This is it. And so I was in New Orleans for 9 months, and I'm very thankful I was there that long, because it made me my friends that I to this day have, like my best friends. And then I hit a point where I started having anxiety at night on a show. I was an assistant on Bad Moms for a producer. I'd met her and gotten the job as an assistant. And I was like, I need to get out. I need to get out of New Orleans. Like, I've been here too long. Like, I can't stay here. A few of my friends that went back to LA, and I was like, this is the moment I need to go to LA. This is it. And so I started telling my friends, I'm like, I'm moving to LA. And they were like, no, you're not. You have no money to move to LA. You have no job to move to LA. You are you're working here. Like, you're making money here. And I was like, nope, I'm moving to LA. Like, there's no stopping me. This is what's in my head. And I was like, it became more and more clear, because there were certain New Orleans based friends that we just had fallouts, and like, we didn't agree. And I almost went crazy, because I was like, I was seeing them for what they were gonna be, and I didn't want to be that, as dark as it sounds. And so in my head, I had made up the scenario that this woman who only hired me for this movie was going to take me back to LA. And that was going to be my next job.
Wow.
So her executive flew in for the weekend. And so I was like, oh, I'll take you out to dinner, show you New Orleans. So I took her to dinner, and I straight up was like, Juliana, I'm going to be real with you. I don't want to be here anymore. And if you guys are moving up anyone that's an assistant or looking for anyone to continue to work with Suzanne, I want the job, and I will move to LA immediately. And she was like, oh, okay. And then she was, she goes back to LA, and she calls me a week later and goes, actually, I'm about to leave, and we're going to move up this assistant. So do you want the job? Because you already know her, she knows you, but you have to be here in a week, because the movie's over in a week. And I was like, yep, I want it.
Absolutely.
And then I was like, oh, I have nowhere to live. And LA is so expensive.
Yes, it is.
So I called the girl I met on Deepwater Horizon, who was one of my friends. I knew she was an assistant director. She lived in LA, but she was always gone. So I call her, and I'm like, is there any chance you're on a movie and I could sublease your place until I find a place? And she's like, actually, yeah. So I had a place to stay. I had to get out of my lease in New Orleans.
Oh boy.
Which I basically paid them to let me out.
Mm-hmm.
And I called my older brother again, and I was like, any chance you want to drive cross country with me? So we did, and I got here, and I again had a major panic attack when I got to LA. because I'd been here a few times and knew people, but it was like the first time I was on the other side of the country from everyone.
Yeah.
And in LA, I think I love LA and New York, but unless you are very confident in yourself, you will drown 100%.
No question.
Like, and so I was at the point where I knew I needed to be there, but I remember my older brother left. He's like, "You're going to be okay." And I took him to the airport, and I sat in an In-N-Out parking lot after he left crying because I was like, what am I doing? I hate myself.
So this theme is consistent along lots of folks that we talk to, which is, in spite of being uncomfortable, in spite of tremendous fear, in spite of having no clue how this is going to work out, you do it anyway, right? And so if people are looking for the keys to success, and I'm definitely using air quotes here because that makes me roll my eyes, there are no keys to success. But if there were, something that you could pull out of your story would be drive into that, right? Drive into that. I don't know how to do it. I don't know where I'm going to live. I don't know how this is going to work out. Because the folks that I know, and this is totally my own biases coming out, and I'm willing to bet you feel the same way. The folks that take the safe path, they get the 9-to-5 job, and they trade 5 days of misery for 2 days of pleasure, and they save their little pennies so that when they're 65 and a half, they can finally start living their life, which, by the way, by the time you're at that age, there's a lot less you can do. You can't travel as much, and if you've got other issues to deal with, you are pushing off 25% of your life to deal with 75% of stuff you don't want to do. That is a terrible trait. That's terrifying. So what I want to draw a context here for people, which is, on the one hand, you have your path, and your path was, I don't know what's going to happen next, but I know I have to keep driving forward. So even though I don't know how I'm going to pay my rent, and I don't know how I'm going to find food, and I don't know how I'm going to find a job, and that's scary as hell, and I fully subscribe to it being terrifying, it's terrifying now, and I'm going to be okay. Conversely, your other option is to live 30, 40 years doing a job you don't like, trading 5 units of time for 2 units of time, in the hopes that you can maybe make retirement at 65 and 70 years old, and that's when you start living your life.
Yeah.
That to me scares that's terrifying. Why would anyone want that?
I tell people all the time, if I had to work a desk job, you would see me jump out the window day 2. Like, you would see me jump out.
100%.
I'd be done.
Yes.
I was on a podcast a week ago, and the girl was like, if everything went away, all your success right now went away, what would you do? Would you go home? Would you restart? And I was like, I would end it. I would end it. And she was like, what? And I was like, I would, because in my head, which is so opposite of most of my friends, and it's like, and I do agree, I think you're born with it, because it's like, they don't get it. Like, in my head, it's either I make it, this goal that is unattainable for most people. Yes. Either I make it or I'm done in this life. I'm done. Yes. Because if I don't think that way, I will not try at all. And that's even like with working out, or it's little things like, the one thing my mom says she's so glad I was born with, that she didn't have to teach me, is willpower. It's like, when I tell myself I'm going to do something, if I don't do it, I punish my own self. Like, I'll ground myself. And my fiance laughs, because if I don't like work out or something and he wants to go I'm like, no, I'm grounded. And he's like, no, you're not. And I'm like, I am, because that's how I mentally have to treat it. Yes. Because that's the only way I'm ever going to do stuff. For me, it's very black and white in life. There's no gray with that kind of stuff.
Do you remember that Ethan Hawke movie that came out probably a while ago, about 20 years ago, where when children were born, they were given kind of a genetic predisposition test.
Yes.
And then they were forced to be on a path, right? And Ethan Hawke was one that had like basically asthma and some other things that prevented him from being successful, because in this society they said, well, you have some medical conditions, thus you can only achieve these very, very small things. And his brother didn't have those things, and he was the head of the police department or something of that. Well, there was a great line in that movie about how when they were younger, Ethan Hawke and his brother would have these little swimming competitions. They'd go out to the ocean, they would swim out to the buoy and back, and all the tests, all the science, everybody told them, well, Ethan Hawke he can't do it. He has lung issues. He can't make it back. But the older brother, no problem. He's sort of a prime specimen, if you will. And Ethan Hawke was always able to outswim his brother. And towards the end of the movie, his older brother says, hey, how were you able to do that? Didn't you save some energy for the way back? And Ethan Hawke said, no, I was going to beat you or I was going to die. And people don't understand when you're saying what you're saying, and frankly, you're mirroring how I feel. We're serious. Like it's not like this isn't a trope. It's like, this is what's going to happen. I will be successful. Finite. It's definitive. There isn't a but. There's not a subline. It is. So when you committed so wholly to that thing, your body, your brain, the universe, you can call it whatever you want, finds these opportunities. It somehow works out. That doesn't mean it's not going to be scary. That doesn't mean you're not going to hit some bumps in the road. But I like to back up some of these concepts with a little bit more data, a little bit more science, because for some people like myself who are built-in cynics about things like this, it's easy to go, nah, that's her. That's not me. So there was recently a study done at Cambridge University around luck. Do you believe that you are lucky, or do you believe you are unlucky? And so they ran a series of tests for groups of people who believed that they were lucky and who believed they were unlucky. And the two tests that stuck out to me the most, number one was all groups. So people who believed that they were very lucky, people who believed that they were very unlucky, and then a control group. So all three groups had to read this 500-page book in one day. But on the second page, just page number 2, it said, you don't actually have to read the whole book. The people that were unlucky didn't comprehend it and kept reading. And the people who believed they were lucky saw it, closed the book, took the day off. They did another study where it was, you had to get from here to the bus stop, which was 50 feet, seemingly insignificant task. And they put £100 bill, right? $100 bill, effectively British pound bill, on the ground. And of the 10 people who believed that they were super unlucky, one of them saw the money. Of the people the 10 people who believed they were super lucky, 9 out of the 10 saw the bill and picked it up. And what it shows definitively, and they did multiple tests, but those were the two that really jumped out at me. What it shows definitively is when you've committed wholly to an idea, your brain, consciously, subconsciously, whatever you want to call it, figures out a way to make those steps happen. And it absolutely happened for you. So let's skip ahead a little bit. Now you're living in LA and you're writing for a bunch of shows. So tell us a little bit more now that you're not quite the starving artist that you once were, and things are starting, you've got a name for yourself and you've got a network and things are growing. Tell us a little bit now, like give us the warm and fuzzies.
So now after I've been with Rob for almost 4 years, and he has been an amazing mentor. He's one of the ones that really, I was doing UCB and Groundlings and stuff on the side. And when the opportunity came, he was like, I want to see your packet to start writing for me. And I gave it to him and he really liked it. And because it's very nerve wracking giving people stuff you've done. Because you're like, I believe in myself, but there's a little piece that I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, of course.
So every time I get hired for a job, I'm always like, really? You want me? But I'm also like, yeah, of course you want me. Because in my head, I'm the best. I was very lucky this year on Holey Moley. Last year, I was just a punch-up writer. So I was just it wasn't a writer's assistant, but it was more of a junior writer. And it was our first season. So they kind of went with like the writers they trusted, which I totally understand. I'm very young still in the industry. And this year the moment came where that writer couldn't make the show because of something. I think there was a death or something. I don't know what happened, but it worked out for me. We'll just say that. And they were basically like, I need to see your latest sketches because we're heavily considering putting you on the show for writing for Rob and Joe full time, which in my head, I'm like, this is great. This is going to be the highest paid writing job I've had so far. And Rob looked at me and he went, are you ready for that? Because he always, before he gives me a good job or before any comic I write for gives me a good job, they always go, are you ready? And I think it's them just saying, if I'm going to take it, am I going to take the opportunity? Am I going to take the chance? Mm-hmm. Because when you prep that much, you better say yes when it comes, because it's not going to come again.
That's it.
My fiance, I troll him because he was asked, a very famous comedian once asked him on a podcast, and he was like, yeah, and he forgot to follow up the next day and was never asked again. And you're not supposed to ask the comedian because that's a big no-no with him. And I told him, I'm like, you blew that chance. And he even knows it. He's like, and so that's why always say yes and figure out the parts you're nervous about. So I said yes on Holey Moley, and they handed me the book of everything I was supposed to work on, the script, and I was like, oh no, what have I done? And I started going through and making my notes and rewriting scenes. And the first day, I was so nervous because you're given this headset. And usually when I've written in the past for Shark Week and everything, I'm in the corner pitching, but you see my script the day before, so you know what I've written, and I don't have to like be on and be live and be funny, right? Because I've already been funny in my dark room figuring it out. So I was panicked because they put on the headset and the PA was like, Rob can hear you. Joe can if you press this button, and the entire trailer of ABC execs can hear you.
No pressure at all.
Yeah. And at this point, I'm a pretty foul-mouthed person. So even though Rob and people at Fox NFL, when I wrote for them, they're all used to that. Like, I'm used to being around a bunch of dudes and dropping the F-bomb and like it being fine because they'll just edit whatever I say that part out.
Right.
And so at this point, I'm like, oh no, I don't want to mess up because this is basically the Illuminati. It's Disney, and you guys want me to be funny and make your show funny. On demand. Yeah. Yeah. Because when I tell people, like, they're like, did you write that? And I'm like, no, I thought of that. Like, most of the things Joe and Rob say is me live feeding them a line. And you train for that at UCB. Like, it's basically improv. So you have to learn that skill. And then you have to make it funny after you learn how to do it. Right. So the first day I was a little nervous and I had a few jokes here or there. And then we go to the trailer and I'm in my trailer and Rob comes and knocks on the door and he's like, you got to be yourself, Chan. And I was like, I am. What's wrong? And he's like, no, you need to be yourself. I wouldn't have given you this opportunity if I didn't trust you. And they trust me to trust you. He's like, you're my guy and you have to perform that way. And so he knew I was in my head. Yeah, he knew I was in my head and he's like, I've given you this opportunity and you're fucking up because you're nervous. Yeah. So I did a few minutes have you seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
Yes, I have.
Okay, you know the scene where Leo is in his trailer and he's yelling at himself and he's like, if you don't get it together, I am going to do this like that was pretty much how I felt in my trailer. Like, I turned on Eminem and I was like, you got to shake this off. You got to get it together. Like, you're going to blow this. You're going to blow it. And it was more of me. I am the only person that can give myself that pep talk. And so I came out of the trailer, lunch was over, I go up there, and I mean, I just started like dropping whatever came to mind. And 60% are good. There's a few that are you can't say on air. Sure. And then there's a few that are very funny. And it hit a point where if it was so funny, it was undeniable. And even though it was a little on the edge, Rob would say it because he's like, let's test it out. And the funny thing is that's what made the cuts for the show. And even because I apologized at one point to ABC, I brought them all a bottle of wine in the trailer the last day. And I was like, I'm sorry for the language. And they were like, you were cracking us up. They're like, you have no filter and it's great. And I was like, please remember that next season.
Exactly.
But yeah, so that, I think that moment really helped because it opened up opportunities where, sorry, my dog. Lois, I'm sorry about that. She was asleep. It opened opportunities where Australia came and like, we see that and we want that for our show. And so ABC was like, well, then you need to hire that girl. And I was like, all right, guess we're going to Australia now.
Wow.
And that was a whole nother experience because every country's humor is very different. And so I had to do a lot of research when I got there of local humor, and they're very sarcastic and they make jokes about things very different than American humor. And so that was another learning curve for me for sure. But I wasn't going to say no. I was going to say, yeah, I'll figure it out when I get there. I have to quarantine for 2 weeks alone. Great.
Now I got some R&D time. Yes.
Yeah. And so it's really, I've been working on a lot of shorts in quarantine, which I know a lot of filmmakers are doing. And I am a very dark comedian, and that's all I want to write right now. And I know that that's very scary to a lot of the world because we're so afraid of what we can and can't laugh at, I feel like. And for me, I trust myself and I live by, if you can't laugh about it, you're going to cry about it. And the laugh is a better cleanup. So it's a weird moment now where I'm getting opportunities for shows next year. And they're more of like, all right, we trust you, but I'm scared because this is not what we're doing right now. So I that's where I am. I've got a lot of great shows under my belt, but I'm trying to make a little bit of new and put my style on things, which is very scary.
Yep.
I think people see the success I've had this year and they think, I want to do that.
Right. I want to skip to that step.
And I'm like, you have no, because even this, and even my friends that are bigger comics than me, we all feel that moment of what's next. Right. And I'm terrified of what's next. And what do I, because I know my end goal, but I don't know the in between. And that's what scares me as a planner, I guess.
It should though.
So it's a state of, yeah. So it's a state of, I'm very lucky, but I don't want to, Rob always kind of scolds me because he says I don't enjoy the moment as much, where I want to enjoy what's happening. And I'm very thankful because I made that happen, but I'm also like, don't get stuck in that.
Yes. What's
next? Because when I worked with Mark Wahlberg on Deepwater Horizon, and I asked him about Boogie Nights, and because that's one of my favorite movies. And I was like, what were you thinking? He's like, honestly, I don't know. He's like, I forget everything after I do it because I'm thinking about what's next. And when he said that, I'm like, oh,
it's not just me.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But also great advice.
Right.
So
that's exactly right.
I think that's what a lot of people, they focus too much on right now, whether it's good or bad. And it's not going to be that way forever. And once you figure that out, and I think that you don't know that until you've struggled.
Struggle is one of the greatest things that's ever happened to you.
Yeah.
Right. And so I believe, and I talk about this a lot, that one of the most fortunate things to happen to me ever in my life was pain, was struggle, was difficulty, because it happened for me. It didn't happen to me. It happened for me. And I was actually just talking yesterday about this, which was it does something to you where when you've really struggled, I mean, really struggled, you don't have a safety net, you don't get a check, you don't find some money, you aren't eating, you don't have a place to live. I'm talking real thin stuff here.
Mm-hmm.
When that happens to you and you've weathered it, especially if it's been extended, right? Anybody can do it for a day, but if it's a couple of years of just getting kicked in the teeth and barely scraping an existence and not knowing where that next meal is coming from, it puts something kind of inside you, right? Where now, when I run into stress or trouble now, I'm like, I get like amped up about it. I'm like, fuck, come at me. Like, come, I dare you. I dare you to come at me because
I've already had this.
Yeah, like you can't do shit to me. I've already done way worse than this is. So like so you like laugh at huge stressors. Like oftentimes my friends and some of my business colleagues, even my wife, will be like, "Aren't you super stressed?" I'm like, literally, I'm like, "Let's go. Let's like it's on." Right? Like there's a weird thing inside you where it builds this at least in me, this tenacity, but this this feeling of like, now I want to fight. Like I like that, like pumped up to like, let's get into it. Right.
It's your flight or fight response.
100%. And mine is definitely like, well, my back's against the wall. Flight is not an option. So fight it is. Right.
Yeah.
And because you've practiced poverty, right? You've done this thing of you've practiced what destitute is. And it sucks. Don't get me wrong. But you survived it, which means you can survive it again. So now it's not as fearful to go a crappy apartment and eating ramen every day. Like, is that what I want to do? No. Can I do it? Yeah, I know I can do it. I can actually do it pretty well. So if that's the worst, bring it on, because you can't beat this.
And it's too.
Uh-oh.
Is shattered. And I'm just like, you're fine. Suck it up.
Yes.
You don't realize how fortunate your life has been. And I'm not saying I was given the short end of the stick because I grew up poor or in a bad area. Like, I made what I could out of it. And I've done, like, that's why when younger people ask me for advice, I'm like, you're not going to like the advice I give you unless you really want to work.
Right.
Do you really want what I did? Because you see the 10 years later, you don't see the 4 years in when I haven't seen my parents because I can't afford to go home. And I'm literally on my own financially. And I would steal crafty snacks because I had no food at home. Kind of. Like if I wasn't working, I had no food. Like I couldn't buy food. But if I didn't go to work, I didn't get fed because they feed you on set.
Right.
So people don't see that part of it. But I think the people who go through that have lasted in the film industry, and the people whose parents a lot of times were in the film industry and they've never seen that part.
Yep.
If they get told no a few times, they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm like, I want to be here. Yes. I want to be here. That's the only reason I'm here. If I didn't want to be here, I'd quit.
Do you connect better with people who have gone through meaningful struggle? Or I'll say it the opposite, which is it difficult for you to connect with people who have never struggled? Do you find yourself dismissive almost of their opinions about things because you're like, you don't know?
Oh, yeah. That was like a thing I had to go through in therapy too, because it's like we're on mental wavelengths that are completely opposite sometimes on views.
Yes.
To where I look at them and I'm like, are you crazy?
Yeah.
Like, do you understand how privileged you sound and how you look like you have no drive, you have no ambition? Like, I remember I lost my job in LA. with the producer I was with for a year or two, which I needed to go because the universe in my life was giving me very clear signs that I need to get another job. And then finally I just got kicked in the ass by the world, who was like, all right, if you're not going to make the move, then we're going to do it for you.
Yep.
And I was freaking out because I had enough money in my savings for the next month's rent, but I didn't after that. And my friend at the time, she grew up in Bel Air and her dad was a big filmmaker. And she was kind of like, well, just call your parents. Like, why are you freaking out? And I'm like, no, I'm 25, or I was 24. I was like, that's not an option. I've been off my parents. My parents haven't given me money since I was 19 at all. Like, they don't get and I am not going to call them. That's not who I am. I was like, you don't get it because you have a safety net. I don't. Yes. I'm my safety net. Mm-hmm. I have to figure this out. I have to make the phone calls. I have to have the real talk. So it was a moment when I was very angry because in my head, I became dismissive of her ever since. And I was like, you don't see the world the way I do.
No.
Because the world to me is like, you can have little or you can have a lot, but it's how much you want to put in for it.
100%.
And people who think it's luck, there's a little bit of luck in everything.
Of course.
But it is more of like, how much are you willing to work? So when the opportunity finally comes, you can take it,
I'm a great believer in luck. I find the harder I work, the more I have of it. Thomas 100%. Jefferson said that. And I think that's a great note to go out on. So where can people learn more about you? Send them to where they can learn more about you, follow along on your journey.
You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram at Chandler Barbee, just my name. I usually post all of my shows on there. I try to post behind the scenes, and I'll be announcing some shorts and stuff I'm shooting with a lot of filmmakers on there too. So it's very exciting. Very
exciting stuff. Blast. I feel like we are long lost brothers and sisters here on our same journeys. This has been tremendous. Thank you so much. For everybody, show notes will have all of her stats in there, so you can find her on the Instagrams and on the Twitters. You can always check me out on pierrerogers.com for more podcasts coming up. I appreciate the time so much. Thank you so much. This was so exciting, so much fun. Till next time, everybody.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.